Hi there, Greater Heartland and KW family. Welcome back. We are at session 3 of Ignite, and I'm very excited that you've joined us today, wherever you're tuning in from. And we are here for Connect with Your Market of session 3. And I'm honored, privileged. We all are all privileged to have John Sprague here with us, our instructor. John, welcome. Love to hear a little bit about you and tell the people who you are.
Yeah, Clark, thanks for having me, man. I was kind of mentioning beforehand in the green room that you've got a pretty all-star cast here. I feel like I should be paying to be in the rotation. So honored to be here. A little bit about myself. I've been in the industry 18 years, failed so much that they decided to make me a coach. And so currently really enjoying that role. And as it's been one of the most challenging ones and one of the most gratifying ones that we've been able to partake in. In that 18-year time frame, I got to fail as a real estate agent. I got to fail as a market center team leader, and I had many failures in a director of sales and production team leader roles too. So you're going to learn about a lot of the challenges that we've been able to go ahead and enjoy and learn to appreciate over the course of the last 18 years.
Yeah, I love that. Oftentimes we don't get to speak of failure in positive terms, and yet that's refreshing to hear from you. That's awesome.
That's absolutely, great. Man. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, awesome. We have an important topic here. Is a lot of us might be starting off our careers, igniting our careers for the first time, or doubling down and learning, getting back to the basics. And yet, this is such a great topic because it's always timely. It's always important to be the real estate professional that we are, the fiduciary to our clients. And so what I do want to go through, of course, we're talking about connecting with your market. And yet before we get into that, right, we are in, just to give you an overview of where we're at in this journey for Ignite. Right. So we're still understanding and discovering how we are the real estate expert of choice. Right. Spark Your Career. We talked a lot about Keller Williams and who we are, how we live out our culture together, our mission, and then embracing your job. What are those core competencies to live out your role as an agent? And today we're in Connect Your Market. Yeah, what I would invite you to do is take a moment and think through the last time since we had Embrace Your Job, right? The past Wednesday, if you're keeping with us on schedule here, that idea of embracing your job, but also you were introduced to those daily success activities. Right. So think through, ask yourself, and I would also, if you're joined not in the Market Center watching, put in the chat or the comment section and Facebook Live or YouTube Live. Well, what challenges did you encounter? Right. What new activity or habit did you meet for the first time that you were surprised about, and how did that work? Right. You did identify an accountability partner in the previous session. How did that work? Were you able to meet with them? Maybe it's a little note like, oh yes, we are supposed to connect. Maybe I got a text to respond to, right? And if that is maybe your first instance of accountability, what did that feel like? What were your ahas from that partnership there? All right. So just take a moment to think about that. We're going to go ahead and jump into the content here, but yeah, jot it down. Again, if you're joining us outside of your Market Center or even watching a later point, would love to allow you to be present here with us. And so put your ahas from since last activity or last session that we had there. So, all right. So John, we're ready to roll, man. You ready to jump into today's agenda?
Let's do it, man.
All right.
Rock.
Cool. So yeah, our agenda essentially for today here, right? We're gonna make sure that you're equipped, right? We're all about equipping and yes, teaching and training, but equip you to take action and feel more confident about this job. So you're going to be able to explain those various factors of your current market, understand what those factors are, maybe some new terms and new metrics to track and how it helps you in your business to focus on the strategy. And of course, analyze current real estate market trends and build your expertise. I'm excited about John. As we were prepping for this course, he even has some extra tools and tips and tricks for you today that he's going to share. I'm excited about that. But yeah, we really want you to start thinking about, what you'll learn today, right? So before we really get diving into the content, this is important. A time to stop, say, I'm here. I've carved out this time what would I like to take out of this? What questions might you have? What would you like to learn more about?
I mean, there is something here. I didn't necessarily want to go ahead and say it like right out of the gate, but I mean,
Yeah.
there is something here that I'd be happy to share is that, the topic we're going to talk about today is all about confidence, really. And as we're moving into uncharted territory with a new market and an evolving market, one of the things we want to ask ourselves is how do I get more confidence? So I just go to the store and pick it up at the grocery store. And what we learn here is that it's about studying what others do or getting into action at a high level and learning from our own experiences. And if you look at any of the tactics in Ignite, you'll come to realize that all of those tactics are designed to breed more confidence in our business, and that's the whole point of getting to know our market, and interpret the numbers and what it's telling us, so we can respond accordingly. So the question is, how can I use some of the content today to instill more confidence in what I'm doing on a daily basis and have more impactful conversations with the people that I care about most?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, all about being equipped, have powerful conversations. That's good. Yeah, we're going to move on and start. Make sure you have your instructor's guide. Didn't get a chance to mention that. So whether you have them printed out in your market center or if you're joining us live, you can find those at ignite.ghregion.com. It's a PDF. It's every single session in one if you download that PDF. So it's a weighty, big size PDF, but we are on, of course, session 3. So all those pages will be 3.1, 3.2 for those pages on session 3. Okay.
Clark, this is a quote from Gary that really speaks to me, right? As we kind of read through it, the real truth, if it's been done before in another market, it can be done in your market. Once it's been done, no matter where, it's just a matter of finding out how that can be possible in your world. And when I read this, I think about modeling and how Gary really has a strong affinity towards modeling. And I also think about my experience as a market center team leader. I mentioned that I failed greatly there. Clark, did you realize, I just thought about this the other day, I failed 2,400 times as a market center team leader. 2,400 times. And, and what I'm referencing here are the conversations that I had with agents that didn't come to our market center. And, there was a number that did. And with that aggregate, I guess, of conversations that I was afforded the luxury of having, it became very real that success leaves clues and so does failure. And that's when I decided that, I'm going to be a recovering entrepreneur. I'm done with this entrepreneurial stuff, because every time I was entrepreneurial, it cost me more money, it took me more time, and it created more stress. And I thought, maybe there's a better way. Maybe I should look around.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Gary's referencing here.
Yeah, absolutely. These models, I mean, it's we don't have to recreate the wheel, so to speak, right? It's been done. If we want to find success in our business, right? We don't know what we don't know, and what better way to step forward and somebody that's already done and model that for us. Well, we'll go ahead and kind of move forward in the agenda here again, and so. Yeah, in that question, if you thought down, hey, what do I want to learn today? Ask yourself, what does it look like connecting with your market? What does that mean to you? All right. Well, what does connecting with your market mean to you? Maybe that's a question you haven't thought of before. So ponder that. But John, what would you, in your experience, right? If I were a newer agent, what should how should I be asking myself that question, or how should I be looking at that question that I don't even know?
Yeah, Clark, I got to talk. I really like the way you pose that, right? What does connecting with my market mean to me? And, as we're going through some uncharted territory with our market and how it's evolving, it's all about confidence, right? So for me, it's how does this knowledge make me more confident? That confident, and it's not necessarily the greatest thing to be saying right now as we're coming out of a pandemic, but confidence is infectious. And you know what? If I'm going to be a super spreader, I want to be a super spreader of confidence, because that yields results. And I heard actually one of the coaching clients, and Clark, I'm sure you can relate to this, is that I get to learn as much from our clients as maybe they get to take away from us. But one of the clients, he said, you know what? Maybe it's not about the law of large numbers. Maybe it's about making an impactful impression on those conversations that I have.
Mm.
And boy, I don't know. I mean, when somebody says, "Oh, how's the market?" and you say, "Gosh, it's good," I don't know. I don't know if that really makes an impact. But if you say, here's what's happening, here are the people that are winning. Who do you know? That might leave an impression.
Absolutely.
And that's to me what knowing the market is.
Mm.
Because every time there's a transition, there's an opportunity for somebody. Who is that for?
Mm. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. I love keying in on that confidence because depending on our personality profiles, right? I mean, there's a lot of data out there that we could look at. And beginning new in real estate, it's like, well, where do I begin? What's the most important? What should I
Yep.
be clearly communicating in those conversations? And there's possibly no right or wrong. I mean, we'll talk about some key metrics that we look at,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And yet it's easily done to have that paralysis by analysis. You can
You
overthink
bet.
things, right? So allow these metrics to equip you in confidence, right? And boldly step into those conversations. That's awesome.
Clark, that's a great point here, right? We're going to go over a lot of numbers today, and for some of us, we're going to be super excited about it, and for others, we're going to put some people to sleep. This is going to be great bedtime, reading, right? And here's the thing I'd encourage you to go ahead and identify one number that you relate to, that resonates with you.
Mm.
Own that number, right? And let that number permeate through in each of your conversations rather than trying to know every single number that's out there. Because that's when we start fumbling, and it just becomes way more difficult than it needs to be.
Well, great. Well, and one other piece here, right? And we'll get as we dive into these. Know um, that you'll see a lot of stats. And you've probably seen these on Facebook yourself as you become friends with more and more realtors on within Facebook, your social media, and you'll see stats that are out there, and so you'll see national stats, and you'll see possibly state stats or city stats, and you might even see local neighborhood stats. So know that there are levels to consider, and as you're building your confidence, knowing that one metric that you really understand and can communicate to, like there is that macro level, right? That's going on at least maybe at a large city level or higher. But then there's the macro level, or the micro, I should say, the smaller level, that where you hone in on specific facts about the neighborhood, or maybe a certain community, right? So the good news is, right, whatever you take confidence in, whatever you want to make your specialty, you'll be able to speak to confidently. Yeah, just know that every single one of those stats, whether it's on a large level, right, at the state, national level, it tells a story, and yet you can also tell a story on a micro level. And part of the key here is, and as we kind of discussed, we will discuss at later sessions, is, well, what's most important for those people
Hmm.
you get to work with?
Yeah, Clark, I think that what you're referencing there, I think is a really big deal. It's perspective, right? I mean, if I just give somebody raw data, that's not really doing too much. But if I can go ahead and say, hey, here's where your neighborhood, how much it's appreciated versus the general market, that's powerful, right? And to the point of like, all right, what number is going to be, what should I learn? To me, connecting with the market, it's all about being a student. And if I'm going to be a student, I don't know about you guys, but I didn't do really good, and I didn't do so hot in formal education. But when I started becoming passionate and interested in things, all of a sudden I couldn't get enough. Right. So find out those things that are relevant to you. Maybe it's your own neighborhood. Maybe you guys are thinking about making a move. Right. Study that market. Right. So I
Mhm.
can give you a perfect example of this. We made a move this past summer, and there was a couple neighborhoods we were looking at, and there's one neighborhood in particular that I found out in our market. I think we'd appreciated over the last 2 years in the general St. Louis market. I think it appreciated somewhere between 10 and 15%. And in this particular neighborhood, in a 2 year period, they saw a 60% appreciation.
Wow.
Whoa! Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's lots of things that I could go ahead and take from that, depending
Mhm.
on where I'm sitting, or what seat I have at the table there. But that's powerful information for the right people, right? Do
Mhm.
you think that those folks in that neighborhood would have appreciated that information? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Ate it
absolutely.
up.
Yeah. Yeah, much more meaningful than an eye opening the 10 and 15%. That's
Yeah, right, exactly. Those were some fun conversations. Say, hey, did you know? So absolutely.
that's great. All right, well let's move forward here. What we're gonna focus in here, and we're gonna move to, at least in your Ignite participant guides, we do want to cover three types of real estate markets, and these are probably not newer terms that you have here, but so yeah, that's page 3.3 on your participant guide. All right, and make sure that we're following along here on the slides. And yeah,
Ah, this is the area you were telling me that we're going to get a curveball. I got it. Now I got you. From the instructor manual. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, you mentioned three different types of markets, right? There's a buyer's market, there's a neutral market, and a seller's market. And how do we know, what market we're in? And when you think about it, it's just a lot to do with the characteristics of the buyer and the buyer's behavior,
Mm-hmm.
right? And as you kind of see there on the slide, you've got on a buyer's market, you've got anything that's over 7 months of inventory. And we'll talk just a second about how to get that. How do I know how many months of inventory there is? And there's a pretty simple way to do that. And then you've got this balance market, right? And that's when there's an even number of buyers out there versus the number of sellers, right? And I skipped over it a moment here, but this buyer's market, this is when we've got far more supply, right? So there's more listings out there than we have demand, right? So I got to be honest with you, Clark. I'd imagine most people that are watching this have never experienced a buyer's market.
But in 5 years, I've not yet seen one.
Yeah. I mean, we'd have to go back. It'd be a decade, guys, almost a decade here in the Midwest. So for all those folks that are double digits, you know what it's like to be in that buyer's market. And here's something I can share with you too, guys, is that the stresses you feel right now in a seller's market, having less than 5 months of inventory, right? I wouldn't necessarily fear a buyer's market. Those stresses that you have, they just shift. They shift, right? Right. And it's just making sure that we're equipped to shift with those stresses. And so one of the things here I did want to kind of point out is how do I find the number of months of inventory? And a pretty simple way to do this is if you're running a comparable for a property at 123 Main Street, let's say, right? And let's say that you identified the relevant properties of however you decide to go ahead and do that search. And in those relevant homes, you realize that there were 10 active properties. So 10 properties that would be in competition with that property, the subject property that you might be bringing to market. And then you also realize that, you know what, there's actually there's two properties that are under contract, right? So then what that would represent is that you would take the 10 active properties and then you take the two that are under contract, because that would represent the total market, the number of opportunities or options that those two buyers had, right? And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 10 plus 2. Now I get myself a 12. And then now there's two buyers that are out there. So that 12, those 12 properties, I'm going to divide that by the number of buyers that are active. And that's those two. So I'm going to take 12 divided by 2. That gives us 6. So in that little example, that would put us in a neutral market.
Yeah.
And that's going to give us a little bit of insight as to what to do with that.
I got to admit, John, I don't know if I've ever had that demonstrated so simply. That's awesome. That's yeah, because a lot of us, we have MLS tools that will tell us the months of inventory. We might have 2 or 3 tools within our MLS that'll tell us that, but that provides immense insight. After 5 years, I hadn't had it explained that simply. I love that.
I appreciate you enjoying it because I was reluctant to share because I didn't want to get overly mathy. I'm trying to say non-mathy with you guys. I don't know if that's a word, but it is now, buddy.
We'll take it. Love it.
Yeah. So all these are great questions to be looking at. What are the average number of days that a home stays on the market? So that's something that we want to keep an eye on and have some level of relationship with that. As we see those numbers go up, one of the things you'll see in the shift, he talks about some leading indicators that would give us some insight as to if our market is transitioning. And one of the first things he talks about is the number of leads. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because, in my opinion, that's a very difficult one to track because each of our businesses, there's ebbs and flows of how much we inject into lead generation, whether it's our time, money, or energy.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is that we inject another variable that's kind of difficult to track, right? Another one, though, that I really do like is the number of showings, right? And so there's some ways that we can identify how many buyers are out there actively looking at properties, right? That's a leading indicator as far as the demand. And as that demand goes up or down, we can identify if we've got which way we're trending. And then one of the final ways here is the number of days on market. Now, that number of days on market's a little like looking in the rearview mirror. The two that I gave you beforehand is like looking in the windshield, right? So we're seeing where the market's where it's coming towards us. But the days on market, if we start to see those inflate, then we know that what's probable there is that we're going to start seeing more inventory hit the market, and that's when we start seeing more competition for our sellers.
Yeah. So a question here, right, of identifying your own inventory in your market. Know that in your participant guide, there is a list of questions on 3.5, right? So as you're going through some of these great metrics to key in on that John's mentioning, there are prompts here on 3.5 to figure this out. We won't take necessarily time to go into your MLS to do that right now, because that could, maybe you have access to it right now, maybe you don't. So consider, as we're going through these questions on page 3.5 of your participant guide, right, go back and spend some time figuring these out, right? Or reaching out to your market center leadership and helping discover that. So just know that as question 1 on 3.5, what is the inventory of your market? Right, go and discover that piece. Number 2, what is your average number of days on a home market? All those are there. It's going to be unique to you, right? And even how you're defining the market. Are we talking how micro or macro are we looking here, right? So good piece there. So moving on here. John, this is a very timely piece to talk about within knowing your market, and that being interest rates and lender regulations, right? We'll talk about this. Yet at the time of being able to live stream this and share this without the region, there's a lot of buzz around interest rates, and everyone's watching them.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, before we jump into interest rates and all of the numbers that we're talking about here, there's something that I'm going to take us out of the market conversation and put us into an analogy of somebody who's got a pretty strong track record of helping people get out of debt. And you guys might be familiar with Dave Ramsey.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that Dave recognized, he recognized that our relationship with our finances was less about a math equation and more about the psychology that we have around it, right? So I'll use that as kind of setting the stage for the conversation of interest rates, because at the end of the day, right now, as we record this, we're somewhere in the 5s for a 30-year mortgage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And relatively speaking, I guarantee you're going to hear somebody say, "Well, my mom, my dad, they bought it at 16%, 18% interest rate." Right, the average interest rate, relatively speaking, we're below the average interest rate over the historic levels, right?
Absolutely.
However, what has changed is we've changed the expectations of the buyer, right? So just in a matter of a 60-day window, we've seen 2 percentage point increase, right? And I just saw this the other day that I thought was pretty profound, is that 60 days ago, as of when we're recording, 60 days ago, if I had a $1,600 a month mortgage, that same house today and today's rate would be $2,600.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, that's impactful, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we've got to consider here, are we ever going to see 3% interest rates again? Now, my crystal ball is broken. It's in the shop. I've been asking for it back. Apparently it's not under warranty. Got a big issue about it, right? And here's the thing. I don't know, but I think it's extremely unlikely that we're going to see those 3% interest rates again. And understanding that we're probably going to see where we're at, and maybe, guys, honestly, we might be going higher. That there's lots of indicators that would suggest that might be on the front. And here's the point: the point of interest rates here is that it affects our affordability, right? It affects that buyer's opportunity to go ahead and pay for a property, right? So one of the things that's been that's impacted our market is those low interest rates. We've seen people in that environment, right? Remember how I mentioned that in every transition, every change that we see in a market, there's an opportunity for somebody,
Mhm.
right? So when we had those 3% interest rates and as equity started to increase, that allowed some folks that were to move up position. It was a perfect opportunity for them because they had equity that they never had before, right?
Absolutely.
And then they were able to parlay that equity and put it into their forever home. And now they've got about a similar mortgage with another 1,000 or 2,000 square feet in their
Yes,
house.
we do. Yeah.
So they just impacted their quality of life in a positive way, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
now we've got to look at what opportunities will start showing up as interest rates start to rise. Cash, right? This is why Gary's talking about stockpiling our cash, right? So as we have opportunities for cash, right? Whether we're cash buyers for our owner occupant properties or real estate investment properties, right? We're going to see those folks start going ahead and stepping up. As a matter of fact, we now have a whole new industry, right? Called power buyers, right? That's something that was not here a year ago, right? So the things like Homeward and Ribbon, where we're taking folks and saying, you know what? Don't worry, we got you covered, and we're modifying some sort of a bridge loan, and we're saying, hey, we're going to set you up, and you're going to look just like a cash buyer to your sellers, right?
Yeah.
That's how powerful it is. And as those interest rates start to rise, those folks that are going to be less impacted by those interest rates are the ones that don't care, that aren't
Mhm.
using interest rates, they're not
Yeah.
using loans.
Man.
So right now it might be an idea of, okay, how do I stockpile my cash if I'm looking for my own real estate investments? Or how do I align myself with those that might have cash to partner with when those
Mhm.
opportunities show up too?
Yeah. That's so good. Yeah. Well, what I'm hearing from that John is, despite maybe doom and gloom that you might hear and fear mongering from interest rates rising, there's opportunity everywhere, in every market, any moment.
Yeah,
We have
and
to
I
put
mean,
ourselves in a mindset to look for it.
yeah, and I think I might be getting ahead of ourselves here a little bit, but it's as appropriate time to bring this up is that, you'll hear I'll probably be referencing shift quite a lot today. And another thing that Gary talks about in the book is that in a shift from more of a seller's market to a buyer's market, you start to see the motivation change, right? And that's really what we're looking at here
Mhm.
as a real estate agent, as a business owner. How is my consumer's behavior? How is that changing? And how do I serve that new behavior, right? And when you look at that, you can start to consider that in the previous one, the example I gave you, it wasn't a need to move example of that move up buyer. It was a want to move. It was a quality of life improvement,
Right.
right? And now what we're going to start seeing is that the predominant number of folks that are out there making moves, when we are fully immersed in a buyer's market, whenever that might be, you're going to start seeing that motivation is going to start being almost exclusively need to move folks,
Mhm.
right? And that's something we can start looking at right now. What are those life events that could trigger a move where we have to move regardless of what's going on in the market? And better yet, who are the people that are servicing those folks, whether it's attorneys or wedding planners or whoever it might be, that I can get into relationship with now to annuitize my business? See, these are the gifts we get in a shift, is that we get to get really intentional and purposeful in our business. Again, to instill confidence in the business.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. That's great. All right. So yeah, we talk about interest rates. There's other economic factors to consider and that are in the headlines that we can talk about, right? Um, so yeah, what other economic factors kind of come into play for buyers and sellers and how investors
Yeah.
that we can bring in and
Yeah.
build our confidence in?
Yeah. Clark, I'll tell you what, man, we could spend, I don't know, a month on this topic, right? I mean, there's probably a whole college curriculum that we could spend right on this.
Yes.
And as a real estate agent, we could probably reduce it down to jobs, right?
Mhm.
As because if our buyers, if they don't have money, right, then they don't have buying power, and then that removes the demand, and now we've got ourselves in a bit of a challenge. Whereas on the other end, this is what you've seen in Austin. Uh, Austin's very near and dear to my heart, even beyond Keller Williams, and so I've had the luxury of being able to witness Austin's growth over the last 30 years. And there's a time frame there where there was 150 plus people moving in every single day because of jobs. And you look at their appreciation, in the last couple of years, they're up something like 20 or 30% year over year. And it's because of jobs, right? They're the new Silicon Valley. And that's a major factor for that market. And so that's something we've got to be sensitive to, because the macro market around us might be saying, hey, we're going into a recession, right? I got to tell you what, Austin didn't go into a recession last time. And in some markets, in some hyper local markets there, maybe they dropped a few percentage points. But the way I say it is that they just took a breath, where the rest of us took a dive, right? So if jobs are strong, we're feeling good about the market in general. And that's a key one that I'd be making sure that I'm having community involvement in, and I've got my finger on the pulse of, because that does make a difference. Absolutely.
Yeah, John, that's so good. It's a point to bring home of, again, yeah, knowing your own market, right? Knowing Austin, what has happened there. They've insulated themselves from a lot of other downward pressures maybe the other markets might see in the economy. But yeah, as an agent, like take a sigh of relief. And know this: it's not your job to be a research scientist on all things about the economy, right?
Yeah.
I would probably have checked out a long time ago, right? Yet knowing your market and understanding the tools that we're presenting here, you might have buyers and sellers bring these things up, right? And feel the freedom to say, yeah, you know what, I'm aware of that. I'm familiar, and kind of share with you what I'm seeing in the market and how I'm seeing how this affects your motivation or where you want to go.
Clark, I'll tell you what, I didn't think about bringing this up until you shared a couple things here. First off, what you kind of reminded me of here is that watch whenever Gary's asked where he thinks the market's going, watch how he responds, right? He never directly answers the question, ever, right? He sees that as a total fool's game. There's another person that I think highly of. His name's Ray Dalio, runs one of the largest hedge funds in the world. And the whole premise of how he built the fund was knowing that he was going to be wrong. Think about that. One of the smartest people in the entire economic world built his entire fund based on the premise of understanding, I'm going to be wrong. So what am I going to do to hedge against that? Right. And so one of the things that you guys can do here, because it's less about what we know, it's more about what the perception is of our clients. And one of the great ways to go ahead and do that, I'll take a page out of a financial advisor's book. And this is what you can do. You can say, hey guys, let's think of, do you believe that a real estate is cyclical like every other market? Yeah, I do. Okay. Well, so then let's think of it as 12 o'clock as the peak of our market. Okay. We're going to get on a clock. We're going to draw this clock out, and 12 o'clock is the peak of the market. And the bottom is 6 o'clock as far as home values are considered, right? So now I know in our market here in St. Louis, the last known peak was 2007, right? Now we might be at one right now, right? We won't know that for another 6 months,
Right.
But 2007 was the last known peak. 2011 was the last known trough. In that time frame, we lost 19% of our value here in St. Louis. And then from 2011, it took us 6 years to get that value back from 2007.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I only bring that up, right, because before I share that, I want to ask the client, right? 12 o'clock's the top, 6 o'clock's the bottom, 3 o'clock, we've experienced some pain and we're still going down. 9 o'clock, we're on the way up. Mr. and Mrs. Client, where do you think we are on the clock?
Love that.
Right. Before you share what your thoughts are around it, ask them. Because I promise you, if you put 10 storied, high accolade economists in a room and you have that same question with it, you're going to get 10 different responses.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And man, that's so good, John, because one, you takes the pressure off you, and in just receiving from that, you're going to learn so much that you otherwise wouldn't have heard if you were just to speak and tried your best to give an answer that you hope they would like to hear, and possibly are wrong.
Exactly right. And I think all too often we get into the position of, here's where I think the market's going. And the way Gary answers, here's what my observations have been. I'm not sure what the future is, but here's my observations. I think that's interesting.
All right. So we got one little more peg here on the diagram. So it's some additional important market factors here to investigate. Yeah, these are still important, right? Maybe not as much in the larger national conversation, but it's still
Mhm.
important.
I think you nailed it there. This is definitely important on a hyper local and a micro level, right? One of the things that as a market factor is school districts. School districts drive values, right? So is the school district I'm in or that I'm considering, is it strong? Is it healthy,
Mhm.
right? Is it accredited? That makes a
Mhm.
difference. That makes a big difference, right? And then the other thing that we've seen here commonly are vacation destinations, right? That's another market factor that can come in because they start to see cycles differently than we do, right? And so where they're, for instance, if it's a summer place, that's when they're on fire, and not a ton of transactions are happening over their summer. It's over the winter time when they're seeing their transactions.
Mhm. We covered 5 really important major factors, some additional ones here, and now is the time we'll take a pause. All right. So, and all of those pieces that we had just shared, and yeah, great points that you brought out there, John. We're gonna pause, and however you want to structure this, if you want to have a conversation within, pair up and say, hey, here's what I'm hearing. What did you hear? What stood out to you? We're gonna take 5 minutes to do so. All right. So, and again, if it's a quick water break at this time to do so as well, you can do that. We're gonna take 5 minutes. Definitely share your ahas. Remember, it's agents helping agents. Don't keep it to yourself. And so we'll come back in 5.
Yeah. Hey guys, thanks for coming back here. I hope you had an opportunity to really take heed in what Clark was asking here about jotting down some ahas, and it's a real important piece as far as the reflection piece. Uh, that's how we learn, guys. And hopefully, we had a chance to go ahead and reflect on some of the things there and start thinking about how we can put that into practice. So super excited about this and keep moving forward here. And Clark, you told me we've got some more things to cover here, right?
We do some other goodies.
I like it. I like it. Yeah. So, it looks like, we've got a few different steps of building our expertise, right? And, one of the things to consider here is that when we talk about how, getting to know our numbers and our expertise is about confidence, there's some practical things here that can come away from having a knowledge base. Is that, when I heard a statistic the other day, Clark, maybe you've heard it too, is that, when you say it confidently, the statistics, 70% of the time, people will believe you, right? And
I just believed you.
right. And so what's interesting here, guys, is that all of a sudden, when you know the numbers, all of a sudden you get fewer objections, right? You get fewer tennis matches with the clients and say, well, here's what I think, because they're in feeling, right? And this gives me an emotion. They're not an evidence. And when you're in evidence, it's hard to argue with that. And one of my favorite quotes is that in the absence of drama, oh my goodness, I totally messed this up. In the absence of data, drama ensues. Right now, I'm not talking about we're on Geraldo throwing chairs at each other. I'm talking about stresses of anxiety, right? That's the fear that starts to emerge when we're in emotion, right? But when we get into data and evidence, even if the numbers aren't pretty and what we want to see, we still can go ahead and put together a plan, which that gives us energy, that gives us confidence, right? And so 4 steps here: learning the market, right? Really understanding what's going on in our current market. And we talk here about the lore, the language of real estate. And a lot of folks will say, well, why do I need to know about numbers? I care more about people, right? And I think that that's 100% true. And I'd encourage you to consider here that every one of the numbers that we talk about represents someone or something, right? And it's those numbers tell a story, and if we can interpret that story, it's something that many want to hear about. And it's not just about saying, hey, here's the raw data, right? It's here's the raw data, and here's what this could mean, right? Here's some people that could win. And so the language of real estate is a phenomenal tool, and to utilize. And the way to get that there is you're going to talk to your market center leadership. I'm sure this is coming up in your regular team meetings, and understanding where the market is in relationship to where your market center is, right? With some of the different things as far as inventory, sales, written contracts, those sorts of things. Those are things we want to know about how we're doing. Because every once in a while, we want to go ahead and lift our head up and say, hey, how are we doing with the rest of the folks out there? We don't want to dwell on it, right? But we want to say, hey, are we moving in a similar direction here? Or are we totally off base, right?
Yeah, I love that. And this goes back. I mean, it's a good point. Lean into your market center, right? Whether it's in the team meetings or if there's a standalone class to discuss the market as it is. If there's not, what would it look like for you? Yes, even a newer agent possibly to start that up. And but ask other agents, seasoned agents, right, of what they're seeing.
Clark, you just touched on something right there. Right now, I love the idea of leaning into the market center, and I might take it a step further. Step up, step up, and lead into the market center. And if for instance, if the language of real estate isn't being done at a level that you desire, go be that change.
Yeah.
Right? I promise you, people will find that, and opportunity will follow. Right? And I think it's a real big deal. Now, not only does that have the case, but one of the best ways to learn any of this stuff, any of the sessions that we're going to cover in Ignite, is go deliver it.
Yeah.
Go share it with others. Go educate others. Go educate your market. Go educate your sphere. Right? I can tell you one of the best. Gary actually just asked all the coaches, what's one of the best things that you've seen your clients do to get engagement with their clients? And one of the best things that I've seen is there's One of our clients has a Facebook Live that he does on a weekly basis, and he just goes over, here's the market numbers, and here's some of the real estate investment opportunities that are showing up because of that.
Mm.
And then he just kind of dissects one or two of the different opportunities. And he now has a following that is on there of 30, 40, 50 people every single week.
I believe it. Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
I'd join.
That's some cool stuff, right?
It is.
So is that something we could share? Maybe, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So in this piece, right, John, you'd mentioned an opportunity to share a really cool tool that's brought insight to you and, of course, to your clients that you work with.
Yeah.
So this is too good not to share. So I'm going to bring on your screen.
Yeah.
All right. Actually, I'm going to blow this up just a little bit more. Maybe that'll help some folks out.
There we go. Yeah. And this, what's cool, guys, is that I'll walk you through this real briefly, and then Clark's done an awesome job of being able to go ahead and set up to where you can actually download your own.
Mm-hmm.
And so the language of real estate is great because it gives us perspective as to where we're at in relationship to the rest of the market and year over year statistics as far as seeing some of those trends. Yet when we find ourselves in a position like we're in right now, where maybe we're in a shift, maybe we're not, right? Which, by the way, another thing Gary talks about in shift is one of the first things you'll see in a shift is confusion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we see it with not only our agents in our markets, but in our own mind, right? Gosh, that deal went awesome. Wait a minute. Why didn't that one go under contract this weekend? That's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if we let, those are those little seeds that start, if we don't go ahead and address and we let those germinate, that's what erodes our confidence, right? This is the drama that I'm talking about here that we want to go ahead and eradicate. And the way we do that is we look at what's going on in the market at real time, right? So you can see a few different data points that we've got here. There's a couple others that I would recommend throwing in there. One would be how many properties came back on the market over the last 7 days, as that might show that all of a sudden our buyers might be getting more sensitive to what's being demanded of them. That's a leading indicator, right?
Yeah.
So what we can do is we can jump into our MLS or other areas that would be able to go ahead and give us this data on a weekly basis and just get a snapshot. Then over the course of time, we can go ahead and see what those trends look like. And you'll see here on the next page is an opportunity. Where is it at? All right. So then you'll start seeing a graph, and this kind of gives us some trends on things. Just some general rule of thumb here. And now this is a little bit prettier. Now we can share this with our clients and that sort of thing. Just general rule of thumb here is that if we see 3 of these data points start to go ahead and show some patterns of change, that would indicate that we actually have a trend. Yeah. Right. And so this gives me a chance here to share as well that, guys, one other reason that this is important is that this is a competitive advantage. The whole idea of knowing my market and being proactive out there and being a student of human behavior is a competitive advantage that you can offer your clients. I promise you guys, if these are things that you're studying and then you're studying how your consumer behavior is changing, you're at the tip of the spear. You're learning things that guy in the ivory tower on Wall Street, he's not even going to see that report for another 30 or 60 days, much less interpret it.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is really important for us to understand. Hey, guys, I'm at the tip of the spear. I know what's happening. Now, I can also share with you a strength if overused can become a weakness. We already are having conversations with agents that are coming in that are aware that, hey, something's amiss. Right? And so they're having conversations with sellers and they're saying, let's make sure we don't go ahead and have too much exuberance with our offer price and list it for double what the market is sharing. Right? That worked last week, maybe not this week. Well, now if there's another agent that comes in with a little more naivety and they say, you know what, let's do it. Let's swing for the fences. And no data is presented to the seller, right? And both are eagerly optimistic. I gotta tell you, as a seller, 8, 9 times out of 10, I'm probably going to go with the most optimistic person. Right. So I've got to go out there and I got to make sure I can share, hey, here are the things that we're seeing that are presenting some yellow flags. I don't know if this is going to show up in the market down the road, but it's something let's be considerate of. Right.
Yeah.
And, there's 2 things that'll cause a market to physically move, to change, if you will. And one is a fundamental change. Check. Interest rates up 2% over the last 60 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
The next is the rest of the market to recognize how that change is impacting. As we're recording this, I don't know. I don't know if that's 100% there yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's a competitive advantage for your people, right? We might not know what that opportunity looks like in the future, but it's a great opportunity for us to share. Hey, things are changing. Do you want me to keep you informed of those changes and the opportunities that present themselves as they do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I do too. So then it begs the question, well, what opportunities could show up? I don't know. Tell them. I don't know. There might be opportunities as a seller, as a buyer, as an investor. I'm not sure. But there's a lot of uncertainty right now. And right around that uncertainty, the one thing I am sure of is that there's always opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And what category are you in? So I know when to call you if these opportunities show up.
Oh, that's good, man. That's a real good qualifier right there.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, you've done a cool job. You're able to go ahead and get this. You guys can download this. I'd encourage you guys to do it on your own. Right. We do have some folks that they'll work with their market center to do this as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's value in actually taking a moment, reflecting, and harvesting this information yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a QR code there. If y'all want to take just a few seconds, I'll leave it up just a little bit longer. That way, you'll at least have it on your phone. Maybe you can email it to yourself. And if this, for whatever reason, doesn't work, we tested out beforehand. Definitely reach out and be more than happy to get it to you. And so I don't mind sharing my email there. It's clarkkindle@kw.com, and we'll make sure you get it. Moving on to keep learning about the market. This would be piece number 2.
Yeah. So when it comes to noticing changes in the personal business, this is where I kind of reference, okay, hey, if that home didn't sell over the first weekend like it has the last 60, 90, 120 days, that having your finger on the pulse of that and trusting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I promise you, if you're listening to this conversation and you're engaging in Ignite and you're having those voice-to-voice, face-to-face conversations, you are the tip of the spear.
Mm-hmm.
Trust yourself.
Yeah, that goes right in line with, just a little faster. Yeah, learning that clientele. What are new objections that you're hearing, right? Or hesitations, conditions that they're experiencing or fearing, right?
Yeah, I mean, so this is something here that this allows you, also brought up in Shift, surprise, surprise, is that as our clients, as their behavior changes, so should our messaging to those buyers and sellers, right?
Mm-hmm.
For instance, one of the messages that we would hear from somebody that would consider selling their house over the course of the last short while was, where would I go? Because as real estate professionals, we've done a phenomenal job of freaking people out and telling them that there's no inventory, right? Which, by the way, we'll put that in the parking lot. I think there's a bit of a myth around that. Yeah. And so the message that might show up there, right? You could create a whole make offer for immediate response there, right? And a message there could be, hey, here's 5 strategies to go ahead and sell your home for top dollar without becoming homeless.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, here's the thing. You got to know what the strategies are. Right. And I got to tell you, they're not anything that's just blow your mind. It's just making sure that they understand that there's options there. Mm-hmm. Right. But where the market that we're moving into, this is where I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit a few slides ago, is that recognizing, how does this impact our lead generation? And if our motivations change, then we might want to become more strategic with who we start building relationships with. And it's funny. I'm just hoping we get this in time. There's something called an extreme Pareto principle. Have you heard about this, Clark?
Maybe once, but a good refresher would be great.
Yeah. So it's the premise of the one thing, right? And so we know the Pareto principle is 80-20 principle, right? Mm-hmm. So that 20% of our activities yield 80% of our results, right? So extreme Pareto would be taking 20% of the 20% and then 20% of that 20%. So here's something that's really interesting. When we're thinking about clientele and where am I going to go ahead and devote more time, money, and energy into the key relationships, this is something to think about, guys, is that if I have a database of 300 people, right, that principle would suggest that there's 20% of 300, there's 60 relationships that would yield 80% of my referrals. That in itself is pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
So now I can identify, I can allocate more time, money, and energy to those folks. Guys, I can keep going, right? Remember that extreme part, the extreme Pareto, 20% of 60, that's 12. Statistically speaking, there's 12 relationships that would yield 64% of my referrals. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
Statistically speaking, there's 3 or 4 relationships, right? 20% of 12. There's 3 or 4 relationships that would yield 52% of my referrals. Who are those 3 or 4 people for you?
Yeah.
Right? Well, I'd make an argument that they either have extreme social influence or professional influence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's who I'd be looking for right now. I'd be looking for those folks that have professional influence, that are serving people that are going through seasons of life, right? That would have a life event that could trigger a move. And how do I build and deepen a relationship with those folks?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm going for.
Yeah. And John, I think we pretty much touched on this. Listen to the individuals, that next piece that is of this diagram, right? Being present where you're at and knowing, of course, yes, where they are and how best to help them.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it.
So to wrap up this diagram, right, of building your expertise, and again, so much this just intertwines, right? Because we've already talked about the headlines, and headlines are headlines. They're there for a reason, to spark an emotional response, right? So how do we possibly keep those in context?
Well, I think that this is honestly, I think this is a very intuitive slide to have in here. At first, when I was looking through it, I didn't really think much of it. And as I had a chance to go ahead and digest it, it makes a lot of sense, right? Is that, where we want to be at as the time of this recording, we want to be at a position here, not of Chicken Little, sky's falling, oh my gosh, everything's going to hell in a handbasket. That's not the case at all. Nowhere near it, right? And we also don't want to be in a position where we're saying Pollyannic, whatever, those guys are all crazy, right? Because I can tell you, going through the last shift, there's 3 different groups of agents, right? Those that were proactive, those that were reactive, and those that did nothing, right? I can tell you those that did nothing, they got flushed out of the industry. Yeah. The guys that were reactive, they survived. The guys that were proactive, they actually thrived in that downturn. The best years ever, year after year, phenomenal years. But here's the thing, though. Those headlines, to your point, are designed to evoke emotion, right? And it's our job to stay grounded in the evidence, right? Reinforcing, putting more or further underscoring our interest in making sure we know what's actually happening out there. Because one of the things that is a little different than the last shift is the proliferation of social media and some of the search engine optimization. Being a student of the market, I'm using a lot of this, and guess what shows up in my feed now? I mean, everything's doom and gloom. Everything, right? Everything's, oh my gosh, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious how the general public reacts to that. And it's our job to make sure they understand, hey, that was clickbait. Here's what's really happening.
Yeah. Yeah. John, I'd also add, this is a little checkpoint for us, right? Well, what are we feeding ourselves? How are we responding to those headlines? What are we pouring ourselves unknowingly, that maybe these same fears that our buyers and sellers that we're going to be talking with?
Yeah.
Right? We got to protect our own mindset, and so be careful.
So Clark, this actually, I'll take that out of the parking lot, the inventory thing, right? Mm-hmm. So, this is something we hear almost on the daily, right? There's no inventory, there's no inventory, there's no inventory, there's no inventory, right? And then we go out on social media and then we tell everybody there's no inventory. So now we proliferate, this whole objection now coming back to us, right? We're manifesting all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, I don't think it's true. I don't think the numbers show it, right? So here, think about this, Clark. So in 2019, 5.3 million homes were sold. 2020, 5.7 million homes were sold. And then 2021, 6.1 million homes were sold. Most homes ever in recorded history. I'm confused. How do we sell the most homes ever and there's no inventory to sell?
Yeah. Yeah. Things are moving. People are moving.
That's it. What's happening is we're in an unprecedentedly fast market. It's not that inventory isn't there. It's just moving faster than it ever has, giving the perception that we don't have inventory, right? That's knowledge that we can now use that's real versus emotion.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's a great spot here to take some ahas or crunch on that, right? Knowing that from the headlines and what the market is saying, how do I now act, right? What do I now do with this knowledge? What am I taking away from this? Knowing that things are moving, we've had more sales in a given year than ever. How should I approach my lead generation? Right, things are moving fast, so now is the time to take action, right? But we're going to take a couple of minutes here. We won't take all 5. We'll take 3 minutes to do some ahas, write them down, jot them down, and share it with one other person in the room. All right, and if you're watching with us, love to see that. If you're watching Facebook Live, YouTube Live, elsewhere, not in the Market Center, go ahead and put in the comment box there what your ahas are, and we'll come right back. All right, welcome back and sharing those ahas. We're going to keep going here. So next is focus on utilizing the resources. So know that with KW, you got a lot of technology to help you connect with your market. If you have not yet done so, there's 2 apps to download. We talked about this. The first one is the Command app and also the Consumer app. All right, so make sure you're able to log into those. If you have any trouble, your resources answers.kw.com. And yet, those are our mobile applications. We want to spend just a brief moment on Command. And so, John, I know there's a particular tool that you wanted to bring into focus as it relates to the market. And so let's go ahead and share what you got there.
Yeah, Clark, we talked about how all the conversations that we're having now and that are represented in the shift book, it's all designed to go ahead and give us more confidence in our business. And, when it comes to Command, I mean, we know it's a robust feature, and we know some features are super awesome, and some we've got, we're on the work to do list, right? And an area that I can tell you that I love, and anybody who knows me knows that the pipeline is my favorite tool
Mm.
in our tool belt, because I believe it's an energy tool. I believe it's a lead generation tool. I think it's a lead conversion tool. It's a budget tool, and it's an organizational model tool. So it touches everything. It's the central nervous system of our business.
Mm.
And Command is something that no other platform has. Not Boomtown Sync, Brevity, any of these guys at this juncture has this level of clarity of being able to learn, where is my next paycheck coming from?
Amen.
Right? I
Yeah.
mean, when we live in a variable income world, that creates a lot of stress. Again, in the absence of data, drama ensues. And that's where that anxiety shows up. And when we have that anxiety, in a weak moment, we can make a weak decision, and we can go ahead and erode our standards and make some pretty dumb decisions, right? And so many of us, what I've found, are doing, we're making good decisions based on little information about our business. And there's a way that we can get more information about looking through the windshield, about understanding what our cash flow is going to look like over the course of the next 90 or 120 days.
Hmm.
So for any of us that are on the call right now that have had those transactions under contract, we know we've got clarity as to what that income looks like, right, when it's pending. Well, what if we had that same clarity as to what we should expect our income or our cash flow to look like 90 days beyond what's already under contract? And that's what I love about the opportunities here. And so I'm just going to share with you real quickly what I see some of the top folks do, and they modify it, they tailor it just a little bit so they can get some extreme clarity here over the next 120 days. And when you look at it, it's set up exactly how a sales agent would look at it, right? All these are milestones here: cultivate to appointment, then we'd have the appointment, and we go to active, and then we go to under contract and close. But if I put my business owner lens on, right, that's the lens that says, John, cash flow is second only to oxygen. I want to be hypersensitive to that cash flow. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and nix out appointments, right? Because here's the thing, Clark, what I notice here is that we could go on an appointment, particularly now we're fishing further upstream. We could go on an appointment with somebody that says, hey, I don't really want to do anything for 6 months, right? On that same day, you could feel the phone call that says, I want to write a contract with this person that we've never even talked to.
Yes.
Right? So to me, it would make a lot more sense to have everybody in one area. So what we see most folks do is that they're going to put them in cultivate. And the default of the stages is hot, nurture, watch, right? Which, by the way, that's what you're going to see in pretty much every other CRM. And so what's cool here is that we're able to edit our stages. And so, guys, if I'm watching, I'm probably putting this on pause right here, jotting down these different stages and the probability of success.
Screenshot. Right? Yeah.
Just do a quick screenshot here. And if this is something I want to go ahead and integrate into my business, I'm going to go ahead and edit the stages when we're through here. And without going through all the probability, what I can tell you, this isn't empirical data, right? Because the pipeline is a dynamic tool, but our observation has shown that if I go ahead and identify somebody as a 10, right? And so this definition is typically somebody that I know they're going to do something within the next 7 days. Now, I want to be clear about this, Clark. It doesn't mean that they're guaranteed to work with you.
Right.
They haven't given us a verbal commitment, but I'd say most people would go ahead and qualify them as, hey, it's better than a coin toss. I've got a shot, right? So I've got a shot, and I know they're making a decision within 7 days. Well, our observation is that we convert 90% of those folks, right? What we focus on expands. So then I might go ahead and quantify those folks as a 9 that are between 8 and 30 days, and you can see 8s and 7s and how that could fit in and what those conversion rates look like, right? And here's kind of the cool piece. Now, when I go back, right, when I go back to the stages, now I can identify what is my probable income. I don't know if you guys can see this down here. This is the cool part. I love this. This is my favorite thing, right?
Those hide on you. Yeah. Make sure you get one of these.
They do. Let's put a request order in and make this real big and bold. Yeah. This is the stuff, right? This is the stuff. So what I know here is that these are the next 30 days that I should expect my cash flow. Well, if my expenses are above $12,000, I've got an issue. Right? And so it allows me to go ahead and plan accordingly and make the appropriate decisions as I'm moving people through this. And the way that I see folks utilize this, I'm going to totally steal from one of the last slides here. But what I see people do is that they focus on the daily success systems, right? And in Ignite, you're going to see making X amount of contacts and having all the different activities. And one of the things that I would consider is let's go ahead and make sure that we're doing the activities with purpose, right? So if we're making 10 contacts a day, can we add at least one person to this pipeline?
Yeah.
Right? What if that was our goal each day?
Mm.
Here's the math, Clark. If we did that, if we added one person to our pipeline that was just a nurture, that not even that they said they want to do something in the next 90 days, we know our observation there is 50% of those people are going to convert. And what's cool about this is that if I work 48 working weeks, 5 days a week, that's 240 people that I put in that pipeline, 15% conversions, 36 deals. If I look at that, by the way, that's a system. That's a lead generation system and lead follow-up system. And if I just focus on that one thing, 36 transactions come out the back end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Opportunity. Yeah. There's a ton in here, guys, that I see massively underutilized.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a mindset shift, or have you think about it differently. Most of us possibly see this, if you've had transactions, as a have to.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly right. Exactly. That's exactly how we see it. Oh, wait a minute. Never really thought. What you're doing here is that P&L, if we're at a point where we're looking at our finances at a P&L, that's looking in the rearview mirror. What this is doing is it's complementing that rearview mirror with the windshield of saying, hey, what's my revenue look like?
Yeah.
And now I can make decisions accordingly. And think about that. You're making really good decisions without this information. What would happen if you did have the information?
Well, Matt, you definitely have an immense amount of tools to communicate your market and so many different options there. But we're kind of wrapping up here. So before I go into the daily success systems and then we begin in the market center to lead generate together, John, as we've spoken so much about how to build your own validity by understanding the market. We didn't dive a whole lot into too much math. I think maybe just shared one or maybe two little formulas there, but so much of it was about your mindset and your confidence and how you approach those conversations, right?
Totally agree, right? I mean, that's the whole point of it, right? If we're doing it and it's just a math problem, then we're doing it because it's an exercise and not because it's a purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so John, I just want to thank you so much for guiding us here today. Man, I enjoy the conversation. I knew I took down some notes. I got some screenshots. I got some new tools. But yeah, more than anything else, thinking differently about how to connect with the market. Even if you're not a numbers person, I trust if you leaned into this and leaned into it well, you're seeing the opportunity to understand how the math or the metrics can help you be even better of a people person and being that agent you want to be. So, John, thank you. It's phenomenal.
Clark, I appreciate being here. Thanks for having me. And being a coach yourself, I think you'd also agree that one of the most gratifying things is to actually see folks take some of these concepts and put it into action.
Yes.
So guys, I'm going to challenge you guys. Let's make sure this is an infotainment. I would love to hear about what's the story about how you guys are using some of this information and some of the wins that you're having. And do not hesitate to reach out to me around that. I would love nothing more than that.
Yeah, John, man, that's good. Yeah. How do we take action? How do we let you know how that action was taken? What's the best way?
Yeah, you bet. Feel free to reach out. Best email for me is John Sprague, JOHNSPRAGUE @KW.com.
Awesome. That's great. Okay, we're going to wrap up. So we're going to go ahead and hand it off to the market centers, if that's where you're present, to go into those daily success activities.
Go get them.
Likely to look at those conversations in a new manner now. And we'll join in next time we have know your value proposition or develop your value proposition, where you'll walk away with your own value proposition message with Dan Holt. So John, thank you again so much, and we'll catch y'all next time.
Thanks, guys. Take care.